Advanced Studio Classroom is on the air. Have you ever suffered from a sports injury? Well, stay tuned because today we are talking about tennis elbow. Hello everyone and welcome to Advanced Studio Classroom. My name is Brandon and today we begin our health article. And I have two people in the studio with me. First, welcome Amanda.
Thanks, Brandon. It's great to be here for a health article.
All right, and Albert, welcome.
Hey, it's good to be here. I feel like health is one of those things where you take for granted. You just abuse yourself in terms of eating unhealthy snacks, not taking that walk or exercising.
And or you can be injured when you are exercising, while you're exercising,
That's
right?
true.
And that's part of what we're talking about today. The title of our article is Rehabilitating Tennis Elbow. Now, when we talk about rehab or rehabilitation, what are we referring to, Amanda?
Well, we're talking about helping your injury heal again or getting back the movement that you once had in that part of your body or what part of your life. So if you go into rehabilitation, it's to get back what you originally had or the original state.
You think of physical therapy, right?
Right. Usually in the news, what I feel like I hear or see or read about that's really popular is rehab for celebrities. And they're usually talking about maybe substance abuse. But rehab is also, it includes physical therapy, people who injured themselves in terms of muscles or bones or whatnot.
Okay. Now, so we are talking about sports injuries as part of this. It's not really, as we'll find out later, the main part of what we're talking about. But just at the open here, panelists, have you ever suffered from a sports injury?
Yeah, here and there. Nothing that has lasted long. I think my worst injury was getting into a scooter accident. I was hit by a truck, a army truck.
Wow.
Did you have to go to get some therapies, physical therapy?
Yeah, my whole left side was just purple and bruised. The truck ran a red light. But, that's another story for another time.
Okay. All right. You're here today.
Yeah.
Thank God. All right.
Yes, I've had several sports injuries. I think my first one as a child was a wrist. I broke my wrist.
Ooh.
Yeah, skateboarding. And then we have a game in New Zealand called netball, similar to basketball, but you don't bounce the ball, you pass the ball. And I've sprained my ankle playing netball. And then when I was at the gym, I worked at the gym for a time, I did a lot of teaching aerobic classes, and I hurt my knees.
Ouch.
So, overuse syndrome of my knees. So, I've done a few things.
Okay. Did you need any treatment for any of those?
Yes. I went to the physical therapist for both my ankle and my knees.
Okay. All right. And that can take some time to heal, right?
Yes.
Depending on the injury. I have sprained my ankle before. And, that doesn't take a long time to overcome. But I haven't, thank God, had any major injuries related to sports anyway. I did hurt my back a couple of years ago, and that was a big surprise. It's a sign I'm getting older, and I did have to go to get some physical therapy for that. But anyway, so listeners, I'm sure many of you have had similar issues, and this particular issue we're talking about today is tennis elbow, and we'll get into more of what that is in just a moment, but let's take a look at our deck before we go into our reading. What does our deck say, Albert?
It says, discover how to take care of this pesky health issue. Now, whenever I hear the word pesky, I usually associate it with things like rodents.
Mosquitoes.
They're really annoying and they don't go away.
That's right.
And it's it just gets on your nerves.
And health issues can be annoying as well.
And get on your nerves.
Yes.
Yeah, because they can come and go. and it can be small. It can be quite a small pain for a time, maybe chronic or acute, and then it disappears and you think, oh, okay, I'm good, but then it may come back.
Yes, it can come back. Back pain is often like that. It comes and goes, right? Hopefully it goes. It doesn't stay the whole time. Anyway, we are on page 42 today, and if you have your magazines, you can open it up to that page. If you have your digital device, you can follow along. Right now, we will have our first reading for today.
Rehabilitating tennis elbow. Discover how to take care of this pesky health issue. Tennis elbow, also called lateral epicondylitis, is inflammation of the tendons, tendinitis, on the outside of your elbow, and is the most common pain people experience with their elbows. There are more than 200,000 people in the U.S. suffering from this condition every year. Statistics show that nearly 1/2 of all tennis players will suffer from this injury at some point. However, this group represents less than 5% of all reported cases, according to the Virginia Sports Medicine Institute. This means the majority of people who suffer from tennis elbow actually don't play tennis at all.
Okay, so we are talking about tennis elbow, and we get a definition of what tennis elbow is, Albert.
Yeah, so tennis elbow is not what I imagined it to be. I thought it meant something like, oh, you're really good at tennis, so you have this secret move called tennis elbow. But yeah, tennis elbow is an inflammation of the tendons on the outside of your elbow, and it's the most common pain people experience with their elbows. It sounds really painful because you move your arms and your wrists a lot, and the elbow connects that together.
Okay, so let's break this down a bit. The first word there that I want to discuss is inflammation, and that's just swelling and pain in the part of your body, and it's often red, and it may feel hot. And so that's what that is, and so it's inflammation of the tendons, Amanda.
Right, and a tendon is a part of your body that we have in our specialized terms. It's a thick, strong cord inside the body that connects a muscle to a bone.
Now, Amanda, you study anatomy. Am I wrong in thinking that the tendon is like a rubber band for a human body?
It's similar to that, yeah. It has the flexibility to be able to do that because of the material. Like it said, it's a strong cord, right? Unlike bone, which is more rigid and can't move. So there is definitely a lot more flexibility of movement with a tendon.
Okay, so this inflammation of the tendons, this is called tendinitis. So that's something that you may come across, listeners. And this pain, this inflammation of the tendons, it's on the outside of your elbow. And as Albert already said, it's the most common pain people experience with their elbows. And you see a diagram there at the bottom of page 42. And so you see kind of the area that this is referring to. So it is something that is common and as a result of, when we're talking about the elbow. Not everyone experiences this. Panelists, do you know anyone or have you known anyone who has suffered from tennis elbow?
Yeah, I've known several people that have suffered from tennis elbow, and I think they've had chronic pain with it. Usually, if they stop a movement that aggravates it, then they're okay. But yeah, I've known a few people.
And chronic pain means it's just ongoing, and that's not a good place to be in. You don't want it to be ongoing. Well, how many people suffer from this in the U.S. each year, Albert?
200,000 about. Yeah, more than 200,000 they suffer from this.
Okay, so quite a few people, but not a whole lot, really, when you compare it to the entire population. The U.S. has, 300-something million people? I'm not sure.
330, I think.
Yeah, so not really that much, but, it's common enough that you may know someone who has it, right? Okay, so we get some information here from the Virginia Sports Medicine Institute. What do we learn from this quote?
We learned that nearly 1/2 of all tennis players will suffer from this injury at some point in their life.
Okay, but this group represents less than 5% of all reported cases. Okay, and so it's not really so much about people playing tennis, right? It does happen when you play tennis, but it actually happens much more outside of that. There are other reasons for it, which we can get into later. So it does say at the end of this section, this means the majority of people who suffer from tennis elbow actually don't play tennis at all.
Right, you'd think because it's called tennis elbow that it's mainly associated with people that strain their elbow playing tennis. But in actual fact, that's not the number one reason people get tennis elbow.
Ooh.
I mean, the name is a bit deceptive.
They should
Right.
change the name.
They should, but we have not.
It's kind of like what we call a misnomer.
Right.
Right.
What is the definition of a misnomer?
Something where the name of like the definition is not obvious, right? But you mentioned that is not actually the leading cause of tennis elbow. What is the leading cause of tennis elbow?
Well, it is an inflammation of the tendon. It's an overuse
Yes.
of that tendon, right? It's responding to overuse. And so, of course, it makes sense that tennis would be one of those reasons because when you're playing tennis, you're moving your elbow in that manner time and time and time again.
Right.
Right? So you would think, okay, that's an overuse of that tendon. But that's not the only reason. Many different motions can do that. And we're going to learn more about that a little bit later.
That's right. And next, we are going to learn about the signs and symptoms and also about some of the activities that cause tennis elbow. Let's learn about that in our next reading.
Signs and symptoms. Pain is located outside of your elbow and sometimes may radiate to your forearm and wrist area. Which activities cause tennis elbow? Any activity with repetitive wrist motion, e.g. hammering, or lifting objects with an extended elbow and palm facing down, e.g. taking out a gallon of milk from a fridge, can easily irritate your tendons. You may have already noticed tennis elbow actually comes from overusing your wrist and forearm, not so much your elbow.
Let's talk about the pain. Where is the pain located? Amanda?
Unfortunately, it is located outside of a person's elbow, and sometimes it can radiate to the forearm or wrist area. Now, when we say radiate, we're talking about it can spread. It can continue to spread out towards a person's forearm, and a forearm is the lower part of their arm, between the wrist and the elbow. So it can cover from the elbow right down to the wrist area.
Okay.
Yeah, whenever I hear the word radiate, I imagine, sitting by a fireplace where the heat is spreading out from the center all around. And
Which sounds cozy,
yes,
but in
but
this
now
case...
with
Much
tennis
better
elbow.
than this issue that we are talking about. Okay, but we do get an idea. We know where the pain is located. And again, if you refer to that diagram, you can see, the elbow there and the area that it's talking about. Well, which activities cause tennis elbow? This is important to know because, maybe we can prevent it if we are aware of the activities. And so first it talks about activities with repetitive motion, right?
Right. So even something as simple as hammering, if you're a construction worker or you work in remodeling, if you're using a hammer repeatedly in the same degree and angle and, approaching the nails and stuff like that, it will cause tennis elbow.
Okay.
Or lifting objects with an extended elbow and palm facing down.
All right, and it has to do with the wrist, right? So this repetitive gripping motion or repetitive gripping activities. So especially if you're using your thumb and the first two fingers, this all can contribute to tennis elbow, that repetitive gripping. And so you have to be careful in how you lift things and so forth.
Earlier last year, I also aggravated my back, and I learned from the doctor when you're picking up stuff, right? Usually you try and keep it as close to you as possible, especially with heavier things. The further away it is from your spine and your body, the more stress it puts on your body overall, especially the back. So, right here it says, extended elbow, palm facing down. Just when you pick up stuff, just imagine you want to give it a hug, pull it close towards you.
And you can kind of feel that. If you put your arm out a certain way,
Yeah.
and I'm extending my arm right now, I can feel the strain inside. So you can just kind of just think about that and how you use your arms and be careful. So they give an example, taking out a gallon of milk from the fridge. So it says lifting objects with an extended elbow and palm facing down. This can easily irritate your tendon, okay, or your tendons. So you have to be careful in how you use your arms. And what do we learn next, Amanda?
Well, I think we've already talked about this, but you probably are already gathering this. Our listeners are gathering this already, that you may already have noticed tennis elbow actually comes from overusing your wrist and forearm, not so much your elbow. In fact, your elbow is kind of the buffer for it, right? But because you're overextending or overusing your wrist and your forearm is causing pain within the elbow.
Okay.
Radiating.
All right. So those are the activities that can cause tennis elbow, at least some of them. And we've learned about some of the signs and symptoms and where the pain is.
Right. And just for our listeners who don't happen to have our magazine in front of them, you mentioned earlier on the bottom of the page, there's a photo of this, right? And I feel like what's happening is the tendon is within the muscles and near the elbow. So it's being inflamed, so it's like swollen, and it's just making that painful for the elbow location. And that's why it hurts so much.
Okay. All right. Well, how can you prevent this? That's important to know.
Yeah.
Let's find out in our last reading for today.
How to prevent it. Now that we already know what tennis elbow is, it is essential to understand the do's and don'ts to prevent it, especially if you are in a high-risk occupation. Don'ts. 1. Avoid working with your arms out straight and wrists angled up. 2. Avoid snapping arms out straight. 3. Avoid forcing arms to the end of your range of motion. 4. Avoid grasping objects tightly or repetitively. Do's. 1. When lifting, step closer to the object with your elbows bent and palms up. 2. Move arms in a steady, slow motion. 3. Keep your palms up in a resting position. 4. Alternate arms as needed for a lengthy task. Among all these tips, the most important principle is always keep your elbows bent at 90 degrees and your palms up whenever you are lifting, carrying, or holding any object.
Okay, so we know what tennis elbow is. Now we need to know about the do's and don'ts to prevent it. It's essential to understand the do's and don'ts, especially if you are in a high-risk occupation. What do they mean by high risk?
Well, a high-risk occupation is when something like the chance of it happening is much higher than otherwise. So it's like risky. So it's like high risk.
And some of those occupations include painters, plumbers, mechanics, construction workers, office workers. Even.
Why office worker?
I think it's because of the keyboard, typing.
So even the motion of typing, well, I suppose if it's overuse, you're overusing your wrist at that point.
Right. So a lot of, people need to be careful. A lot of people work in offices, right?
Holding an implement of some kind, like
maybe
paintbrush.
Maybe we should consider laying off the Facebook.
Yeah. But usually when we think about typing, it's more of the carpal tunnel, right?
Not scrolling. Would scrolling count?
I don't know. If you have been affected by scrolling, please write into us letters at studioclassroom.com.
Yeah, I'm wondering because if you use your mouse, and you're doing a lot of cutting and pasting, that might also, because you're clicking on the mouse, and that can be overused. I mean, I felt that strain before through my arm, through my hand to my wrist. Yeah. But I don't know if it would radiate all the way up to your elbow.
Yeah. I have seen these, what are those mouses called? Ergonomics? No,
ergonomic.
Ergonomic mouses and keyboards where instead of being horizontal to the desk, it's vertical. So you type, imagine like you're holding a cone or something and you just type like that, which is really weird.
Sounds strange.
It sounds strange, but maybe it's something we should look into.
All right. Well, right now, let's look at the don'ts.
All right.
We're talking about the do's and don'ts. So what should you not do? What's Number 1, Amanda.
Avoid working with your arms out straight and wrists angled up.
Yeah, if you're able to do that right now, if you're driving, don't try this. But if you're able to do that, you can feel that strain, can't you?
Yeah.
When you put your arms out like that and the wrist angled
I mean, I
up.
could see you doing that if you were painting underneath a bench or something like that. That could cause strain. But in an office job, you wouldn't really be in that
No.
position very often.
Right, yeah. So I think it must be more of the typing.
Construction or
yeah.
things like that.
But number 2, we see avoid snapping arms out straight. So again, just putting the arms out
Well, I
straight.
can see that makes sense
Yeah.
because you're putting strain on your joint.
Right.
Right? And so the tendon actually absorbs that impact. So I can see if you're doing that time and time again, like overuse of that, you could cause a pain.
And then next we talk about the range of motion. Don't force your arms out to the end of your range of motion. And Amanda, range of motion? Can you tell us about that?
The degree of movement in which a joint can be extended. So it's as far as the joint will go.
Right.
So you don't want to go further than that because that, again, is going to cause strain and impact on the joint and even can make it turn in the wrong direction if you're not careful.
Right, I could just imagine a door and you're pushing it past the point of its hinge.
Right.
So it's kind of like extending that range of motion.
Exactly.
Okay, and what's the last one there, Albert?
Avoid grasping objects tightly or repetitively, which is, I guess the mouse, right?
Yeah. Well, as I talked about earlier, that repetitive gripping motion it can cause issues. Right? So.
Well, and I can see that's why it would apply in tennis because you hold the racket, you grip onto the racket continuously. Not only that, but there's the impact of the ball hitting the racket.
Okay. So those are the don'ts. What about the do's? How do we start off, Albert?
Okay, so when lifting, step closer to the object with your elbows bent up and palms up. Yeah.
Okay, so the important thing I think is the elbows being bent.
Exactly. I think if you go away with anything today is to remember to keep your elbows bent in any movement you do. It applies to your knees, for other things too, but so that you're not keeping your joint completely at a certain angle. That way you're able to absorb any force.
So you're not straining those tendons, right? Those muscles. Okay, and number 2, Albert?
Move your arms in a steady, slow motion.
All right. So,
no sudden motion. I mean, number 2 of the don'ts was avoid snapping your arms out, right? That's quite a forceful movement. And so if you can do it slow, then your body is able to adjust to it.
I mean, I can't really imagine when you're snapping your forearm. I guess when you're punching somebody.
Yeah, when you, if you're doing
bag
one of the martial arts,
okay.
you would be punching. Yeah, definitely.
And I think some of this is true for, a lot of other things. When I hurt my back, I was walking up the stairs. I don't know how quickly I was walking up them, but I was skipping steps. I was not, I have long legs, so sometimes I don't want to step on every step. I just skip steps, but I ended up hurting my back, I think, as a result of that. So sometimes when you skip steps, there are consequences. Literal steps, and then also steps in
that
life.
belongs in a fortune cookie.
Anyway, so be careful. All right. And number 3, what is that?
Keep your palms up in a resting position. Again, you don't want to lock your joints, your wrists included. And so if you keep it in a resting position, then you actually are keeping the flexibility within your wrist and you will avoid any injury.
Okay. And number 4, alternate arms as needed for a lengthy task. So don't just use one arm the whole time. Change it up, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, some people, as we know it, you have a dominant hand, like you're left-handed or you're right-handed, but switch it up from time to time. Right. This way you'll give both arms an exercise and make them stronger.
It actually reminds me the other day I was returning home from the supermarket and I had bought groceries and I had 2 bags of groceries, quite heavy, and so I was having to alternate them between my 2 arms. Well, one was heavy, one was light. And the heavy one I had to keep alternating because I wanted to lock my elbow out, to take the weight.
Yeah.
But the problem was it would strain my elbow right? So that's a practical one for every day is when you are carrying groceries, try to bend your elbows and alternate your hands if you're carrying it. Because I was still needing to walk home with that. So.
Yeah.
I've done that before, walking home from the supermarket, because here in Taipei, I walk a lot more than I do in the U.S., and so I was walking back. It's maybe a 10 or 15-minute walk, and I maybe have a couple of bags, and so I switched to give my arms a rest.
Yeah.
Right, because just like thinking back now, I feel like it feels more comfortable to lock your arms, but in the long run, it's not beneficial. And also, if you bend them, you give your muscles a workout.
That's right. Well, as we end today, what is the most important principle that we need to remember?
Always keep those elbows bent at 90 degrees and your palms up whenever you are lifting, carrying, or holding an object.
All right. So we kind of learned a lot today, didn't we? We talked about the symptoms. We talked about, what is tennis elbow, first of all, and then we talked about preventing it and the activities involved. And maybe you're wondering, who is affected by this? Or maybe older people are affected more. Well, actually, I found online it's most common at about age 40.
Wow.
So, if you're middle-aged, watch out for tennis elbow especially, but it can actually, occur at any age, but it's more common around that age.
Right, and I feel like a lot of this really helps out in preventing you from getting a bad back. I feel like this is really good practice. If you keep your elbows bent at 90 degrees, you'll be carrying things in a proper way and just overall just help yourself and your body.
Yeah, just be careful in how you move around and, don't do anything extreme.
Right?
And so that's all we have for today. But guess what? There's more tomorrow. Tomorrow we will come back and continue our discussion of rehabilitating tennis elbows. So we hope that you will join us again. And for now, I hope you can check out our topic talks, review what we've been talking about through skits and other videos. So if you have your cell phone or digital device, you can scan the QR code there at the top of page 42, or you can go online to studioclassroom.com to check out those topic talks videos. Well, join us again tomorrow. Until then, this is Brandon,
Amanda,
and Albert
saying goodbye.
Goodbye.